All right. What's up, everybody? How's everyone doing out there? It's great to be here. Yeah, it's great to see everyone here at this awesome virtual conference. And I'm super stoked to have Andrew bring me on and to be able to kind of, bring some of this information to everybody. I hope everyone's having a great morning. It's a nice, bright and early 8:30 a.m. here out in Oregon. But obviously those out there on the East Coast have already kind of gotten a start to their things. So I hope everyone is doing well. Again, I appreciate anyone joining in. I'm looking forward to, there's a Q&A that's going to be going on after this. I'm looking forward to any questions that come in. I'll try to definitely leave a few minutes for that. So let's make sure you shoot in a comment and I'll do my best to respond to all the comments that come in. I think any comment coming in from Facebook or YouTube, I think should be able to be piped in, and I should, be able to get to those. So a quick bio about who I am. My name is Ryan Wheaton. I own Craft Brew Creative, which is a branding and design studio focused on the craft beverage industry, mostly beer. And I also host a podcast called Branding Brews. I've had the podcast for like 3.5 years. It's a bunch of interviews with industry professionals on the topic of marketing and branding, mostly for beer. But yeah, it's a bunch of great content. If you're interested in marketing and branding, definitely check out Branding Brews. You can go to brandingbrews.com and check out that podcast. So today, I was really excited to bring in this topic. It's something I've been wanting to kind of dive into some more. And the seminar is called Members Only, bro. It's branding for beer clubs. And I think especially in today's world, with COVID and all that fun stuff, that I think a lot of breweries have had the opportunity to kind of focus more on connecting online, connecting through Zoom, connecting, doing e-commerce and just living more in the online world. I think it's kind of made sense. There's might have been some breweries that have kind of overlooked the idea of creating a special club. It could be like a bottle club. And I've taken some interest in this too, from the wine industry. One of my really good friends is a wine club manager in Napa. There's a number of benefits to having a bottle club or having a beer membership of some sort. And really it comes down to like, you're creating a kind of a brand experience for your customers. You're inviting customers in to be a kind of a part of a tight knit group of people. And of course, there's also the benefit of the sales aspect, right? I think Craft Peak is doing and John is doing a seminar here, which I'm excited to check out for this conference. But they're talking about direct to consumer, and so the idea of creating this membership and creating this brand, and then or just bottle clubs in general, is that you're having an idea of what you're going to sell in advance. This is going to apply to maybe like mug clubs inside of a brewery, but also talking about bottle clubs where they're prepaid every month and you send them a shipment of beers. It'll apply to both, but in the case that you're sending some prepaid every month and you're sending somebody some bottles, every shipment every quarter, every month, you're knowing how much beer you're selling. You're kind of having some of that income already set, right? So I just want to dig into what is a brand and why is it important? So a brand, there's like a million different definitions. And I think there are probably some that are better, but I think for this instance, this is what I thought really would help make sense of what a brand is. We can also say what a brand is not. I mean, a brand is not a logo. A logo is a brand identity. So the logo is kind of like the clothes that are on your brand, right? So your brand is like who you are. It's what distinguishes you in a market, and it's what makes you unique. If you're somewhere where there's not a brewery anywhere within 20, 30, 40 miles from you, being unique may not be quite as important because you've kind of got this market established. But if you have any plans of distributing or selling your beer outside of your little area, then you're going to need to have something unique. You're going to need to have a brand that's really going to like represent who you are and show that you're unique. One example I might use is that being unique, like say you have goals to be like Colorado's best lager brewery, right? So we haven't even talked about a name. We haven't even talked about the visual identity, like the logo or anything like that. But right there, even just being known as Colorado's best lager brewery, that is something that makes you unique. And that is something that starts creating a brand. So another important aspect is that a brand is what other people think you are. I encourage you, and you absolutely should do everything you can when you're creating your brand to create this kind of persona, to create this kind of visual, to create this kind of messaging that represents what you would like your brand to be. But in the end, is really what other people think of you. I kind of like was thinking earlier, it's like the whole saying of like, if a tree falls in a forest, does it make a sound? Well, it's like if a business or a brand doesn't have any customers, is it really a brand? Right? If it's just you and nobody knows like, who you are, do you even really have a brand? It's like, I think not, because, you have to have other people to distinguish and be able to kind of come up with their own perception of who you are. And that starts becoming who your brand is. So that's kind of like the what is branding? So why care about branding? I think this is an important question. I think sometimes it's easy. It can be easy for a business, being someone who's running a small business myself. And I know a lot of small breweries. I work with a lot of small breweries, and I know that you wear a lot of hats and you're putting out a lot of fires. And so sometimes branding can get set as a lower priority. There's some quotes, kind of paraphrase quotes I wanted to like let you know. There's a gentleman named Bill Kenny, and Bill Kenny, he's like the co-founder of Focus Labs, and he does branding work. And he was on a podcast called the Predictable Profits Podcast, and he had some really great statements on why you should care about branding that I thought really related to the beer industry. And it goes something like this, basically, that your brand needs to help do the heavy lifting of differentiating you from your competition. It can be a lot more work if you're just letting like the word of mouth on the quality of your liquid do the heavy lifting. So the idea there is that, if you make rockin', kick butt, awesome beer, but you don't have a good brand, then you're relying on just the beer itself and the word of mouth to do the kind of promotional work for you, to let people know who you are and, kind of do the marketing. Now, of course, beer is super important and it has to be awesome, but if you're in a market that has more breweries around you, or more competitive market, I think quality is like, that's just, it's like table stakes. It's something that has to be there. Right. So then in a situation where you've got, 10, 20 other breweries around you and they're all making super quality beer and you don't have a good brand, well then, that's that. Right. So that also leads to another point where, if you're getting to be like the near peak of your quality and your performance, and you can't really fine tune anymore. With beer, you can always like fine tune and make different recipes. But if you're kind of getting at your peak, then how are you going to stand apart from that point? Right. And that's your brand. So in a competitive market, your brand is really what's going to set you above and beyond everybody else. So I think that's a hugely important aspect of, and why you should care about a brand. So let's dig into a little bit about what makes a good brand. Kind of want to give you a little background. This can relate to your actual brewery brand itself, or it can relate to the brand that you're creating for this club, for this membership. So they're both valuable information there. So the mission and vision, these are pretty common things in just your regular business world, or marketing. Like if you're creating a business plan, this is something that's usually in there. And I think it could be easily just like overlooked. You're just like, okay, yeah, mission, vision is something you just someone can just fill out in a business plan. Like, okay, I need to answer this. But I think when you look at it in this way, I think it really helps. And the idea of a mission is, what problem are you solving in the world? So going back to the idea, or the concept, to say like Colorado's best lager brewery. So maybe when they went out to set out to do that, that there were no lager breweries in Colorado, or maybe in that area, right? So that in that situation, they're solving a problem. Okay, so that's great. They're solving a problem. Basically, it's like, why should somebody care about you? I think that's important, because if you're not solving a problem, then why should anyone really care about you? So that's solving a problem. If going back to the point of like, if you're if you're the only brewery in a community or in a given area, I mean, that could be a reasonable thing to say, that you're solving a problem, that area is in need of some good beer, and you're going to bring it to them, right? So that could be a good mission. And then the vision. So the vision is like, how are you going to solve that problem? So say you're Colorado's best lager brewery. How are you going to solve that problem? Well, you're going to bring in traditional German brewing styles. You are going to go out and research and do some like kind of looking back in history and pulling up some old recipes and refining those recipes. You're going to be using traditional equipment and brewing methods. So those are kind of your vision on how you're going to solve that problem. And so that's going to lead up to, I think, another good point. And that is, a good point is your unique selling point. So this is like, how are you different from your competitors, and why should anyone care about your brand? So this is something that where like, this can really become the backbone of your brand. What makes you unique, right? So like, again, on the Colorado lager thing, that's maybe they're part of like why they're unique. But having this unique selling point, being different from your competitors, that can really start creating things like, creates the backbone for what your brand is going to look like, right? So the Colorado lager breweries, so they might design a brand identity, like a logo and label design that looks more like a traditional German brewery, because they want to represent the idea of being a lager brewery. That can create messaging. Like, so for your website, you can start creating copy and text, it's like really kind of resonating with the idea of that being unique, being different. So that can really, and then maybe like a tagline or a slogan. So all of these unique selling points, the unique selling point can really start creating this whole idea, and start really creating the foundation of what your brand is. And that's going to really start resonating with customers. If you're just, just whatever brewery, and it's just like, there's nothing behind it, there's nothing for somebody to connect to, and it's not going to resonate as well. So let's get into some kind of, I wanted to throw out a number of ideas and things that would go into kind of like doing research, and just coming up with some ideas and just some things to think about really when you're going to be creating this beer club, and creating this brand for this beer club. So I think an important aspect is to look at your demographic, right? What's your everyday customer like? If you're in a downtown location like Chicago or Denver or Portland or wherever, San Diego, you might have a specific type of customer that's coming in, right? Or if you're somewhere more rural, out in the mountains somewhere, then you're going to have probably a different type of customer, generally speaking. So you want to look at those, those demographics, like who's coming in your doors, when you're creating this brand for your beer club, and how you might formulate the beer club. If it's in an area where people aren't used to spending like high dollars for like premium bottles of beer, then you might be like, well, okay, this isn't going to do well. Let's maybe do something that's a little bit more appealing to the everyday customer. and that might do better. So that's going to help formulate how you create this bottle club, this beer club. A point of the premium appeal, as I was just mentioning. Do you have a segment of your customers that are like hardcore beer nerds, that are like just, they know the brewing process, they know ingredients, right? Like they're stoked every time you come out with a new bottle or something, they're picking it up. That a premium audience might make room for you to create a kind of more premium bottle club type scenario and brand in return, right? The lifestyle of these folks, their beer preferences. I think these are all important things to consider, and things you can kind of plan for, and it'll help formulate your club and your brand for that club. What is your current branding already, right? Do you have a story? Do you have a theme that you're going with? My buddy shared this like really rad brewery brand that's in Southern California. They're called Paperback. And their whole branding is this idea of like old school, like 80s, early 90s, like, but mainly 80s, like paperback books, right? It's pre-internet, all that good stuff, right? So they have this whole theme going, and they're writing that. So everything looks like an old paperback book. So maybe you've got this theme, or you've got the story, you've got this look and feel. So you'll want to decide when you're creating your club and you're creating the brand for your club, how is this going to fit into your existing brewery's brand? Are you going to make it totally unique? We're going to go into some examples and show you, but maybe this is a completely unique name, right? And it's not going to have any real alignment directly with your brand that you have already, right? You might want it to be different, but you might also want your beer club brand to kind of like to fit in and align with your current brand. I mean, the benefit of that is that it's just you're gonna start building on your brand, and it's gonna help reinforce your brand. Is if you create a beer club and a beer club brand that aligns and looks with your current brand. So that's something you'll really want to kind of take a look at and see, which method you might want to go with there. The experience. You'll want, I think part of like an awesome thing is with a membership or a club is that you're creating an experience. And like all this stuff is, again, like going back to the idea of what a brand is, it's what somebody thinks of you. So every touch point, every aspect of an interaction that a customer has with you is creating your brand, right? Your delivery driver could be almost more of a brand representative than the owner, right? They're out there every day talking to a bunch of people out, and they're representing your brand. So that's something to consider, right? So this experience, you're going to have the opportunity to connect customers with the owners and the employees. And I think why this is important is that you want to be able to bring people in to the inner circle, right? My experience, like with the biggest beer brands that I'm have an affinity towards are ones that I know the employees. I've had experiences there, and I felt like I've been brought into their inner circle. Like I'm a brand advocate of those ones. Like if anyone asks me what breweries to go to in Portland, like those are the ones I'm going to tell them to go to, because I have that personal experience, right? So you have the opportunity in this membership to create this experience, bringing people into your inner circle. Let them know, about the owners. Let them know and like have a chance to meet and know the employees. And that's just going to create this community. And the idea of creating this community really, people are kind of tribal, right? By nature, they want to be in a group. And so starting to create this and bringing them in is going to be a huge aspect of that. Brewing and ingredients. So this is part of the experience that a customer could have. Again, like if you have that kind of premium bottle club, they're probably going to be looking for unique, brewing methods, right? Like, maybe you have a cool ship or some other kind of unique ways that you're brewing beers. That's going to be appealing and create an experience. The ingredients, that's always huge. you might, maybe you use really unique ingredients, and that's part of like what represents your brewery and your brand, right? Like maybe you use like foraged like botanicals or like foraged plants or just unique things, right? Those unique ingredients can be what creates an experience and can help kind of create your brand as well. So right, we've got all this research done. Um, you've done all this planning. You've figured out, a name. A name is hugely important. I don't think I have a slide for that, but obviously, a name needs to be able to resonate with somebody. It needs to be interesting. Ideally, it's easy to say. Ideally, for a name, you can get all the social media accounts. Like that's one of the first things you want to do when you get a name, and you just go and lock down like an Instagram and Facebook, Twitter, and all that. Get those accounts so you've got that, so you own that. But now it's launch time, right? We've done all this research. So I want to talk to the idea of some different ways that you can open up your club to members. And that one thing to consider is, do you want to open it up to just VIP members first? And some of the ideas on that is that if you open it up slowly to VIP members, like an inner circle, you can really get an engaged group of people to help give you feedback and to make your club better. You're also, you're opening it more slowly. So you have an opportunity to kind of like fine tune things as you're going, as opposed to if you just open the floodgates right away, you could potentially be overwhelmed. Which is going to hurt your brand, because if you're overwhelmed, you're probably not going to be able to respond to people as quickly. If they're having trouble signing up and they're having trouble making payments, there's all these elements, right, that could just go wrong. And if there's too much at once, you may not have the time to put out those fires, and then right away it's going to be like a challenge, right? So that's something to consider as you launch. And in that kind of idea, which is something I think is really interesting, and this probably could be a whole talk on its own. But the idea of invitation only branding and marketing. This happens like in fair amount in the kind of tech world. Like Facebook. When Facebook opened, they were invitation only, and that has some benefits. There are definitely downsides as well, right? But it can increase desirability. I think of like, if somebody can see a fence, right? Say you've got a page on your website that's for your VIP club, but it says like registration closed, for 2021, it's closed. Well, somebody can see that fence and they're like, well, man, what's over that fence? Like I want to see what's in there, so that it has the opportunity to like increase desirability. That also, these invitation only style things, they're really can be connected with high end or luxury brands. I think that's just something that you see, well, with a luxury brand, they're trying to keep out the riffraff. I mean, to put it frank, right? So they're trying to keep a consistent look and feel of the people that are associated with their brand. Not that I think you should do that. I'm just saying that's what's associated, can be associated with this kind of invitation only thing. So this one I think is great. We already talked about creating an experience, but I think one that's really cool and interesting is that it creates a whole customer identity. The customer, the person that's in this VIP or in this invitation only club, they carry that, right? They're like a card carrying member of this VIP club. So it's, if Ted has a bunch of friends and they're like, oh man, like I just saw that brewery, they just released their shipment of their new bottles and they've got this beer, and man, it sounds amazing. I wish I was in their VIP membership. And here comes Ted, and he's like, oh yeah, I'm in that club, like, yeah, and that beer, it was awesome. It was rad. Now all of a sudden, like, he has this feeling of being this like VIP member. He has this identity, right? And that's another way of creating a brand advocate, of somebody who's going to be talking about your brand and really promoting your brand to other people. So that creating that customer identity can be created through invitation only. Curiosity, we kind of already talked about that a little bit. Connectivity, again, the idea that these people are in this special group. It's invitation only. It's a limited number of people. They're much more likely to to feel like they're part of a bigger of a group, feel special. And we already talked about feedback a little bit, right? So this invitation only, is opportunity for feedback. You have this core group of people that care about your brand. I'm sure they want to see you succeed, and so you can get feedback from this group. We'll talk a little bit more about getting feedback here in a little bit. So this whole time, I've barely touched on like a logo, right? This mostly up till now has just been like research and what makes you unique and what's your mission and vision, right? So that's half or more of what your brand is, right? So now I do want to talk a little bit about your brand identity, because that is the visual aspect of your brand, and a lot of times that's what somebody's their first introduction to who your brand is through a brand identity. So here's something that I had done like a little bit ago. Blaker Brewing is in the Central Valley of California, which is a huge agricultural center of California and for the US. And so they're kind of like a farm-based brewery. And so this like black bar in the middle there, it's got this kind of like torn top. Well, that's to represent like plowed soil. So if you were to run a plow through the soil, it would leave like this kind of like plowed dirt, right? So this was an element that was carried out throughout their labels and through their website and other elements. And then like on the bottom is this image of like a farm that's got these plowed fields. And this was an image that was used throughout some of their other branding, like website and stuff like that. So that becomes brand identity. The colors, the fonts, that becomes something that a customer is going to recognize and remember. And so that was all part of the brand identity. So talking about logos, I did want to mention the importance of creating like a logo system. A logo, you don't want to just have one logo, right? If you just have one logo, say it's like square, well, what happens if you need to put that logo on the side of like a pen or pencil or something, right? You're going to get in these situations where that logo, the application, that logo is going to be challenging. Or maybe it doesn't work when you shrink it down really small. It doesn't work well. So this is just a small showcase of one I've done recently. And I've done, well, there's actually like, I think maybe another 3 or 4 logos in this logo system. But on the top left and right are this is like the icon, right? And that's just a graphical representation. If you think of like Target, the store, right? It's just a red circle Target, right? The center one on top, that's kind of the main logo. It's a little bit more square-ish, right? So that takes up a lot of area, generally speaking. We talk about on the bottom left is kind of got that little arch going on. This would be great for like a t-shirt. It could be great for a hat. It could be great for a website header or an email header. But it's a little bit more horizontal. And this bottom right one is again, just like another format, another variation that could be something that it could work better for like a letterhead or, So the idea here is you just don't want to have one logo. You want to be able to create a diverse set of logos and that can fit many applications. So that's going to create a much stronger brand and brand identity if you go that route. Another aspect that's going to create really strong brand and brand identity is the use of typography. This is like a sample of some brand standards, brand guidelines that I created for a client. It's basically showing how you use fonts, what fonts you use and how you use them. I think is really important. If you're creating your brand for your beer club and it's going to align with your brewery's brand, well, you might just use the same fonts in the same way that you already have. So in that case, you could be set. But if you're creating something totally unique, you'll want to make sure you pick fonts that they work well together, that you know how you're going to apply them, and that you stick to that. I think like being cohesiveness and that regularity is going to start with building the brand in your customers' eyes, right? So This is huge. I think this is good for, if you're going to be doing invitations or your website or beer labels or posters or sell sheets. All those have a lot of typography, and if you have that consistent, that's going to really start creating a strong brand. So the cohesiveness, super important. I just wanted to kind of just throw out a whole bunch of these different touch points that you could be hitting on with a brand. And for a club like this, right? So you got beer labels, website sales page, the website sign up, emails, invitations, events, merchandise and gear, shipping and packaging. You could design a really cool package that, say when somebody pulls up in their driveway and they see a box on their porch and they can tell what kind of box it is by the way you designed it. They're like, oh yeah, man, my beer shipment's here. Awesome. Right? Or the opening of a box, right? The whole idea of like unboxing something, you can create a whole experience, right? They open the box, say you've got something unique, right? When you open it, that, maybe it's a handwritten note, right? And that feels really personal. And so even just that little touch point creates a really strong branding opportunity. So that plan for all these different touch points and create cohesiveness between all of those. We got the website. Your website, the virtual tasting room, especially in today's world, right? There's an idea. I've seen a brewery that created a beer club and it was a completely different name and they created a completely different website for it. I mean, that's a possibility. Or are you going to integrate it with your existing brewery rep's website? I mean, that's obviously going to be the easiest way to do it. But how is that going to work? How are you going to integrate it? Right. So you have to consider your website. I always try to find cheesy stock photography just because I think it's fun. And so here's this old gentleman and he's super excited. He figured out how to use email, and his granddaughter is also excited about that. So excuse the bad photography, the stock photography. Email. So this is going to be way you're going to be connecting with your customers frequently. So choose an email platform that works well for you. There's like MailChimp or Constant Contact. I think like Square, like the point of sale Square, I think does some email stuff. But you'll want to make sure you've got that. If you don't have an email list already, I highly suggest you get on it and start creating an email list, even for your regular customers, because that's something that you own. You don't own Instagram. You don't own Facebook. If they decide to close their doors tomorrow, you've lost that audience, right? But you want to look at customizing like your emails for this club, right? Have them look a certain way that matches the brand of that club, so that when somebody opens that email, they right away know that that's a club or like membership email. So I think that's a really important aspect. And make sure you stick with that look so that every time they open it, it starts creating that cohesiveness and that pattern. And so somebody's going to start recognizing that brand. Messaging. So you can have a voice and a style of messaging. If you're, and this kind of goes into the idea of segmenting an audience as well. If you're talking to, like, going on to the idea of like a premium bottle club, then your voice and style is like, you're going to be speaking to somebody who is very familiar with brewing, who is familiar with the ingredients. And so you're going to be probably talking in a little bit, maybe more technical, like brewing aspects. And, it's going to be different than you're going to talk to your everyday customer. So, and even then in the idea of segmenting, so say you've got a membership tier that's open to the public that they can join. And then you've got this VIP invite only tier, right? Well, you're going to write messaging this different for this VIP club than you're going to for the open to public club. So, you might be able to like copy and paste some messaging from one to the other, but generally speaking, you're going to probably be doing some custom tailoring to each one. And how you talk about things, that is going to be something that's going to be important. Events are always huge, right? And like a lot of clubs can offer VIP events or member only events. So you just have to consider invitations and promotional items. Invitations, like, do you write maybe a handwritten note or like a handwritten card and like you actually send it to them in the mail? Like that creates a really awesome experience. promotion things like do you have like a Facebook event page? Do you have like flyers or postcards or even your Eventbrite page can have like a branded header, so that's all part of the promotion of it. The registration and experience, registration is huge. Like you want it to be a nice, smooth, easy process. If it's a challenging process and they click the register button on your website and they take you to a broken link, and they're like, I can't register. So then they try to contact you and they send an email to info@yourbrewery, and that info@ email address just goes to nowhere. Well, you just had a huge negative impact on your brand. They've just lost the opportunity to register, and there's just becomes super challenging. So that experience is really huge. So now we're talking about retaining members. This is going. If you're doing something subscription based, the idea of retention is one really important aspect. So you got them, let's keep them. So just a few points on member experience. Customer service makes an impact on what a customer thinks of your brand. And we've talked about this a little bit already, but it's going to be really, really important that you deliver quality experience and quality customer service to these folks, and that they have a good way to get a hold of you. If somebody wants to cancel their subscription and they're into your club, and you make it really hard for them to do that and you don't respond, well, that's just like a huge negative flag, negative impact on your brand. However, if you make it delightful and really easy and you thank them for being a member and like, oh gosh, I'm sorry you're going, but hey, we really appreciate you being here. That customer service, like they're going to be much more likely to recommend that club or your brand to somebody else, right? But if you make it hard for them, then they're going to walk away they're going to walk away mad. They're going to be pissed off. They're going to be like, dude, that brewery freaking sucks, man. I'll never give them $1 again, right? So that's huge. Similar thing, right? We want to communicate well. But on this particular topic, I just wanted to let you know, like you bring the idea that you should let people know, early about events coming up. You should let them know about what they're getting, like any sort of shipments of your bottles or of your beers. So communicating well, just in that aspect, is that communicate early, let them know what they're getting into, let them know what they're getting. So communicate well. Track experience and get customer feedback on a regular basis. So again, the idea, you've got this really tight-knit group of people. It's really important to get that customer feedback, because again, they are what makes your brand. What they perceive is what your brand is. So, you can do things like, I think there's like SurveyMonkey or Google Forms, anything like that. Just create a feedback form of some sort with some questions that would be useful for you. It could be, what did you think of your last shipment of beers, right? And you can have them rate each beer and like let you know. So that really could help drive and make your club better and make the experience better. So you have the opportunity with this tight-knit group of people. I think we should do it, right? So now let's just show a couple of examples of some other beer club brand examples that are out in the wild. These were a few that I found. Little Beast Brewing is in Portland, Oregon. They do a lot of like wild fermented and just really awesome stuff. So they created a club called the Guardians of Funk. Their logo's in the top left there. And so the Guardians of Funk logo is different. It has kind of like an artisan craft feel to it, but it is different than their main logo. They do have it on their main website, so it's not a completely different thing. But I think this is a good example of creating a nice brand identity for their club. Freem Brewing is also in Oregon. They're in Hood River. They're kind of become a really well-known brewery. They make awesome liquid. So they have it called the Freemsters Union. And to me, that sounds appealing. It sounds like I want to join it. Like I want to be a part of a union. Local 541. Like it feels like a union and it feels local. They use the same colors, so it's kind of aligned with their main brand. They use the same colors. They have their PF in the center, which is kind of the icon, the mark of their logo. And so they tie it all together doing that. But again, it's a unique name. It has a ring to it. It's appealing. So they've created a nice brand for their membership, for their club by doing that. The Rare Barrel, people might be familiar with them. And this one's called the Ambassadors of Sour, which I think like the Ambassadors of Sour, it sounds exciting. I want to be a part of that. You want to be an ambassador, right? And this one has a very similar look to the main logo, to the main brand. So they've kept that cohesiveness there. But this, I thought, was just another great brand identity to represent their club. You can imagine that if they have bottles specific to their membership, that they're going to have this on their label. They're going to have it on invitations, all that stuff, right? So another great example. And yeah, we've got a couple minutes for questions. So I want to go ahead and open it up. Make sure you shoot in a comment on Facebook or on YouTube if you're on there. I'm going to keep an eye out here. And yeah, so thank you again for everyone for attending. If you want to reach out to me, feel free. I'd love to answer any questions. If you don't get to right here, reach out to Ryan at craftbrewcreative.com. I'd love to connect with anybody, and like just, yeah. So, yeah, so someone mentions that they're trying to find me on Facebook. I don't really have a big Facebook presence, but Craft Brew Creative. I am on Instagram and Twitter, but if you head to craftbrewcreative.com, you'll find me. John mentions that branding is a collective mindset. Absolutely, totally agree. I think it's like I mentioned, every employee, your delivery driver, your beer tender, everybody is creating this brand, is right, and everybody needs to be on board with that. So great comment, John. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. And John jumps back in again. Yep, vector graphics when you design your logo, and that he uses Canva, but Canva only has roster graphics. Okay, that's good to know. Yes, and vector is a type of format that you can scale to, like you can create it on the side of a building, or and it won't lose it won't get pixelated. It's just and Adobe Illustrator is one that does vector graphics, and you would absolutely want to do your logo and your brand identity using vector graphics. Yeah. And John again, man, John, thanks for the comments. Appreciate it. Mug clubs are a good opportunity to create a Facebook group. Yes, totally. Facebook groups don't get as many followers, but they drive loyalty and engagement. And those are way better than a lot of likes. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, you look at ways to connect these members. And a Facebook group is a great way to do it. There's a lot of people on Facebook. There's other ways you can create like personalized forums. There's options for on your website. You can build like something that's behind, like you have to register to get into it. But you want to make it as easy as possible for people to connect, right? And so a Facebook group might be the best way to do that. It's easy. I'm sure almost everybody has got a Facebook account, right? And so that's where people are at. That's where we're at now, right? With the Craft Beer Professionals group, they were on Facebook. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so we got just a couple more minutes. If anyone else has a question, I'd love for you to pop it in. Again, thanks to the sponsors. Without the sponsors, this would be a lot more challenging to pull off. So thanks to them. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the sponsors. And I know Andrew's got things going, and that's really helpful. Damon jumps in and asks, where is the line on how much you need to describe the branding to the customer, the story for understanding, and stay very surface? So I think your brand identity should kind of throw out some hints and represent what your story is, right? So that's going to be often that'll be their first experience. So the brand identity is really important, that it represents your story, that it represents who you are. And then once somebody becomes, there's what they call like a brand ladder. The more you get to know somebody, the more you get to be a fan of their brand. And so the more experience they have, the more connection they build to that brand. So they can dig into your website. They can dive into, learning more about you later on. So you can get more deeply into who you are, like on your website. make sure that your waitresses, your waiters, your beer tenders, that they know who your brand is and what that brand story is, so that when somebody starts asking them, I'm like, oh, can you tell me more about this brewery? Then you can start deep diving in more. So have those longer stories, more information about the brand on your website, but make sure your brand identity really reflects the idea of what the core unique selling point is, right? And what that core point of your brand is. And I think we'll do really well. Yeah. I have just a couple seconds. Maggie, also make sure you have one color version of your brand identity, like black and white, because you'll need that for a lot of things. Absolutely. One color for a logo is awesome. You'll want to do that. If it has a lot of colors and it won't work on one color applications, very important. Great point, Maggie. Thank you. So I'm out of time. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for checking this out. And I'm looking forward to seeing everybody else around and checking out all these other seminars. So you all have a great day, and I hope to see you around. Cheers.